Good day, everybody, and welcome once again to my After Effects blog. My name is Alan Shisco. I'm a motion graphics designer. You can see on the page right now that this is my website. Please go there and take a look at the reel that I've got. You can also have a link to, well, this blog, which you know about because you're there already, and you've got the resume there as well. Today what we're going to do is take a look at expressions in After Effects. Now, if you don't know what expressions are, it's a programming language based on JavaScript. It's an extremely flexible tool that allows you to do things in After Effects that would otherwise be either impossible or extremely difficult to do. It allows you to do animation without creating keyframes, amongst many other things. What we're going to do today is take a look at my two favorite expressions. Now, these expressions are things that I use all the time in my projects, and I've come to find them absolutely invaluable in my day-to-day work. So first off, let's take a look at the actual expressions themselves. I'm going to go over to WordPad here. The two expressions that we're going to look at are, the first one is one-sided layers. As you know, if you've got a 3D composition in After Effects, if you spin a layer around, once it spins around, you see the back of that layer. Often in my work, what I want to do is I just want to have a one-sided layer. When it spins, I want it to just disappear. And this expression right here does that. We'll get to that in a minute. The next one that we're going to be looking at is the scale bounce expression. This one I use a lot just because I like the way that it looks. It's a different way of bringing objects into a composition. You don't have to use any keyframes at all for doing this animation, and I just like it a lot. I should mention that both of these expressions I cannot claim to having created. Michael Natkin of the Adobe After Effects team came up with this one here, the one-sided layers, and Dan Ebert, who's an extremely helpful guy, you can find him in the After Effects list, came up with this scale bounce expression. I modified it just ever so slightly by putting in, by changing the variables and stuff like that. But Dan's the guy that came up with this. Thanks, Dan. So let's go over to the After Effects project here. And the first thing that we're going to take a look at is the one-sided layer expression. Now, what I've got here is I've got a very simple composition that I'm just going to do a quick little drag, and you can see that it's just a simple camera move that goes around three layers that are distributed in Z space. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit my F11 key, and what I'm doing now is taking a look at the project, not through the camera itself. If I select all the layers and zoom out using my comma key, now you can get an idea of the space that I'm working in. Here's the camera, and you can see that as we move along the timeline, the camera is going to do an orbit from the front, looking at the front of the objects, to going around the back. Now, on each of these layers here, I've got two flower layers, and I've got two text layers. Now, you only see one text layer right now. That's it right there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all these layers, and I'm going to do a little keyboard shortcut, which is going to show me any expressions that have been applied to these layers. And that keyboard shortcut is the letter E hit twice, one after the other. So what you do is you go EE, and any expressions that are applied to layers will show themselves when you do that. So let's take a look at the expression. As we were looking at the expression earlier in the notepad thing, and this is the one that's going to make the layer one side. Now, basically what it does is it analyzes the position of the camera to the position of the layer, and once the camera goes behind the layer turns itself off. You can see that I've applied it to the opacity parameter in the layers. So let's take a look and see what happens here. I'm going to select my cameras just so that you can see what's going on. Now keep an eye on all these layers right here. Okay, as the camera comes around, it's going to go past the Now You See Me, boop, disappears, and another one appears there, which is we'll come to in a second, and the flowers disappear, and you can see they just go disappear, 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 disappear. Now the interesting thing about that is that I applied all these expressions to the opacity layer, so that, let's go hit F12 and get back to the front here. What happens is that when it gets past the front of the object, it disappears, and the ones that's revealed is Now You Don't. So all I did was I just reversed the, in the Now You Don't, if we take a look at that expression, I changed the variable so that if C, which is the if C is less than 0, then it makes the opacity 100% instead of 0%. You can see there, and pop, and now the opacity is at 100, and the other one is at 0. So that's kind of a fun little expression, and all of that is done without keyframes. And the great thing about this is that when you're working away, if you change the camera move, if you were to keyframe the opacity so that the stuff disappeared, then you change the camera move, you're also going to have to go back to your opacity keyframes and move them so that when you get to the middle part, the opacity of these things change. Expressions automate this so that I can change my camera move. And now what I've done is I've made the camera move quicker, but still they'll disappear as soon as it gets past the objects. So that's what's really flexible about that one right there. So the next expression that we're going to go to is the scale bounce expression. This one is courtesy of Dan Eberts, and this one I use all the time in my work. I'm just going to go to the start here. It starts off, let's just bring up the scale parameter here. I'm going to select the layer and push the S key, which brings up the scale parameter, and watch the numbers right here as I'm going to be slowly moving along here. It starts at 0, and it goes up, and it's at 130, 140, then it goes back down to 85, and then up to 106, and there we go. We've got a little bounce that happens. We'll just do a quick little RAM preview of that. And you should be able to see what's happening. It's starting from nowhere, and it just kind of bounces in existence. Now, if I select the layer and hit the U key, which is the Uber key, we're going to see what keyframes are applied there, and there are none. The only thing that's on here to create animation is this scale expression. Now, if you take a look at this, you can start with the three variables that you've got here are the final scale, so you could end up, in this case it's ending up at 100% size. You can change that if you want. Let's change it to 50. And you can see now when it does the same bounce, but it doesn't end up at 100% size. It ends up at 50% size. So you can play around with that one a little bit. 100. And the other two are the bounce duration. The lower number that you have here, it's longer. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change this to 5. We'll do a RAM preview. And you can see that, if you remember the first one, the bounce duration is now a lot faster. I'm going to undo that so that it's 3. And finally, the bounce speed, lower is slower. Let's bring this up to 20 and see what happens now. Now you can see it's a lot more springy. It's got a lot more activity to it, and it looks like it's a tighter wound spring. Whereas if we change this to, say, 5, and we do our preview, now it looks like it's sort of caught in molasses. It's a really slow spring. So you can play around with these parameters here, and until you come up with something that you like, and apply it to your object. And you apply this one to the scale parameter of your object, by the way. So, all right, we got these two neat little expressions. How is it going to help your work? I just finished up a project, and I'll show you. I'll give you a brief overview of the project so you can see what it was that I did and how I did it. Now this is a pre-composition that I did. It's the main comp, and the idea was that this is a show opening for a documentary on a musical group, and they wanted to have a certain style associated with it, a lot of flowers and a lot of movement, and I chose to use these two expressions here for the project just because I thought that it would work really well. So let's just go through it quickly and see what happens. It starts off with full frame video. The full frame video gets matted and goes into the distance. All this text comes forth. We've also got some boxes here, some flowers in the background, and some stars go flying through. And we'll just keep on going here. A little bit of a trap code particular there that comes up with the stars coming out. And it slowly just makes its way along here. Now, as we get closer to the end here, you can see that the camera is starting to move around behind all of the objects that I have that are populating my world space here. So let's just take a little look and see what happens as we get closer and closer and closer, and it keeps on going behind, and what happens? All those layers disappear. Okay, and that is the effect. If we select one of the layers here, take a look at the opacity, and there is the one-sided layer expression on the opacity. So the cool thing about this, like I was saying, if I decide to change my camera move, I don't have to go back to all the opacity keyframes on all of these layers and change them so that they disappear when I want it to. It just happens automatically. Let's go to the scale bounce thing here. Where did I use this? It's kind of hard to see when I'm going through it like this, but I used it on everything except for the video layer. So let's take a look at this box right here. It's kind of a carrier box for the text as it comes on, and as you can see that's a pre-comp bubble box on the road. Let's go to that pre-comp and see where the scaled expression is being used. All right. So I just did these as red solids here, and a lot of them are actually fonts that I used. You can get these fonts. The place that I go to is dafont.com, and they've got lots of interesting looking fonts that you can use just as GAC, as interesting looking objects. So if we hit the scale key here, that brings up the scale, and if we hit the bring up all the expressions that are in this layer, remember the shortcut for that is EE, you can see that we've got the scale bounce thing here. Now it is the same expression as the other one. I used different variables here, but it's exactly the same expression. So if we go through this, let's go to the very start and see what happens. I'll turn off on the road. That was just there for a placeholder so that I could get everything lined up properly. And we'll just go through it slowly and see what happens. There are all the layers, and they're all coming on automatically, and you'll see that they're bouncing all at different speeds and at different durations. And if we take a look, say, at the expression here and the expression here, you can see that I changed the variable slightly. There's 2, 2, and 1, 2 for each of these, just so that everything didn't pop up and the duration wasn't the same for every one of the little individual layers. They all pop up and bounce and end their bounce at different times. Okay, so that was the pre-comp. Let's go back to the main composition there. And I'm going to hit the E key for this one. And you can see that I didn't end up using that one. You can see that I put a bunch of more effects on there just to further sell the effect. First thing that I did is I added the fill effect. And if we go over here, you can see I gave it a color that worked well with the rest of the composition. The next effect that I did was a glow effect. Turn that on and go back to the composition, and we'll just turn that off. And what that did is it's kind of a different way to put a different color around your object. It's kind of a stroke effect, except you're not doing a stroke. It's based upon the alpha of the image. And the way that you do that one, by the way, is you apply the glow effect. You do the glow based on the alpha channel instead of the color channels, and then you really crank up the intensity. That's the key right there, is the intensity and the radius. Then you just got to change the colors to whatever you want, and you're all set. And finally, the last one I did, this is in 3D space, and I could have used some lights, and I could have had the layers themselves casting shadows. But once you start doing that, then your After Effects project really, really slows down on the render. And I was planning on doing this one with a lot of layers in 3D space, and there's going to be motion blur and all this stuff. I wanted to try and minimize the render times. So I cheated a little bit. Instead of having actual light cast drop shadows, I just applied the drop shadow effect. And you can see it just sort of punches it off from the background a little bit more when you do that, and that all works. So let's take a quick look at this composition from the bottom up so that you can see what it is that I did and how everything worked out. So these first three layers, as you can see, there's this funny little boxes right here. These are what are called guide layers. You can view them in this composition, but if you go into another composition, the visibility of these layers is not carried forward. Okay, so these are just here so that I can get just a basic idea of what it's going to look like in the final thing. But I wanted to finalize these colors and everything in the final comp instead of this comp, and that's why I made them guide layers. So first layer that we have here is I call it a bubble box, and that's some flowers. And as you can see, there's a little bit of a move on this if we hit the U key. Oh no, I didn't do that one. That's the camera move. Pardon me. And you can see there's the scale bounce thing again. It comes in. Well, what do you think of that? If we turn on the next layer, there's some more flowers, and there's the scale bounce thing going on. You can see I used it on a lot of these, practically every one of these objects here. Let's bring in the video here. That's a pre-comp, and you can see I just did a cutout on the layer there. And I thought I also applied a glow edge to that, but I didn't. No, I think that was something that I tried and then didn't do. take a look at more flowers. You can see there just to populate it. All these layers are offset in, if we go to position, offset in Z space. That's 250 minus 71, 800. They're offset in Z space, so that if we take a look at this, we'll do a little orbit around here. So that when the camera moves, you can see there's the camera path right going along there. When the camera moves, then you get a nice looking little effect going on there. Let's take a look at some more. There's the bubble box that I was talking about, and you can see that's pretty close to the video layer there. I wanted those to be pretty tight. Starburst, and where does that one happen? Yeah, that hasn't happened yet, but there it is right there. And then I also had some, in 3D Studio Max, I created some, let me just turn all these off for now. I will leave that on. Where is it now? There it is. I created these 3D renders in 3D Studio Max. It's just a star that follows along a path. Pretty simple little thing. And then there's another one a little bit further on here. We'll turn that on. And another star further on here. Where are they? There they are, right there. And finally, a lens flare, which I used right at this point. Let's go back to our main view. I'm going to hit the F12 key. And you can see that as this one star came along, right about there, I wanted there to be a flash just there, just to give it a little bit more visual interest. And then finally, the top layer here was the text on the road. Now this one here was just a rather simple, let me just try and find it here. Just a couple of animators here. And they are, let me actually open those up. One of them is a scale animator, and one of them is an opacity animator. And really simple. All it's doing is, let me just maximize this so we can take a look at that solo. And on the road, it just starts off big and gets small and reveals itself that way. Quite a simple use of the After Effects text animators. Okay, so that's what I did. And as you can see, if I were to maximize this and select all my layers, there's a lot of motion that goes on in there. But let's hit the U key and see how many keyframes are used in this animation. Not that many. Considering the amount of movement that's going on here, these are just for the text animation. These here are used for the lens flare, which just starts off the lens flare and then fades to nothingness. And then in the video, I did a little bit of a rotation, a little bit of position. And most of the movement that you see here is happening with those expressions that I was using, the scale expressions and the one-sided expressions, and a camera move. That essentially is it for the animation in this particular piece. So as you can see, very few keyframes, and it was the motion of the camera and the position of all the layers in 3D space and the expressions that gives it the visual interest of the movement. So basically what I did is that's section 1. There were 3 sections to this animation, all of which were similar, but with different content and everything. So there are 3 sections, and I put them all together in the final animation. There's section number 1, which is the road, section 2, which is story, and section 3, which is the final title. Let's just go to see what section 2 looks like. Give that a second to render. There it is, sharing our story. And finally, number 3, Mary Mary, with the title. So, I was talking about the layer that had the balls and the ramp and all the colors and all that stuff. I made those guide layers so that I could see it visually here, but when I got to the final composition, this one here, I recreated all that stuff right down here. And the reason that I did that is that I wanted to have a little more control over the final colors. You can see that I matched up the colors for the background, in this case to the dresses here. And if we go to the middle section, I changed the color of the background to, well, this one sort of went for the skin tone there. And then section number 1, I chose to match the color with, I liked the blue that was going on there, and I thought that it all worked really well together. So making the color choices in this final composition are what allowed me to have a little more control over how the colors were going to be going on. And there you have it. my two favorite expressions, and how they might be used in a real-world production environment. And at this point, I will apologize to Dan. I noticed as I was doing the section that I spelt your name wrong. Sorry about that, Dan Eberts. Here's Dan's website, motionscript.com, and it's not just a place where you can grab a bunch of expressions and use them. He also does a lot of teaching there, a lot of projects on how you go through stuff and how you can make your own expressions from the ground up. And I highly recommend motionscript.com and Dan Eberts. He's an extremely valuable resource for After Effects and scripting and expressions in particular. So my name again is Alan Shisco. Thanks for taking the time to view this particular blog post. I hope it was helpful, and good luck to all of your future endeavors.